Now today I'd like to introduce one of our new products, which is the TS-364. This is a 3-bay NAS, so it's got 3 main drive bays, which is the minimum number of drives you need for RAID 5. So you can enable RAID 5, probably the most popular RAID mode, by using the fewest number of disks possible. You don't have to jump up to a 4-bay to get the RAID 5 from the 2-bay. We put this one right in the middle. And it also has 2 M.2 NVMe bays internally as well. So you can, when you're installing the drives, you can also see those 2 bays inside. So you can add those if you want some, say, SSD caching or a dedicated SSD volume. In today's video, I want to go through the full setup process from really just getting it out of the box, putting drives in and then turning it on. I haven't done anything other than that, so I've connected it up to my network switch, power, and just turned it on, and the drives are pre-installed so that we can get through the setup wizard. Just some notable features. If I click onto the specification tab here, it's got a quad-core Celeron burst up to 2.9 gigahertz. And if we look at the rear image of the unit, you can see it's got 2 USB 3.2 Gen 2 ports. Those are the 10 gig ones. It's got a single 2.5 gig LAN port, as well as a HDMI port on the back that's capable of 4K resolutions as well. To install the drives inside the unit, there's just 3 thumb screws on the back. The side of the chassis slides off and it reveals the 3 main drive bays. And once they're removed, you can also see the M.2 bays and the RAM slots on the motherboard. The unit I'm using today has a single 1 gig RAM chip, but there are 2 slots. The max RAM on this model is 16 gig. So if you have 2 8 gig modules, you're able to take this up to 16 gig. So we'll go straight into the setup wizard for it. So one of the easiest ways to find your NAS is to use our QFinder software. So when you first go to set up a NAS, when it first opens up, it'll do a search and then it will look and find all the different NAS that are on your network. So here we can see the unnamed one with a question mark. It's not set up yet, which is the NAS 687F1B. So it's saying this server is not initialized yet. Do I want to set it up? I'm going to cancel that myself. I've already got it open in the web browser up there. So, but you would be able to just say yes to that and it would open up in your preferred web browser. So here, if I go to the setup wizard, this is the first thing you see. So it's going to let you know about the QNAP warranty, and if you wanted to get an extended warranty, that's also an option for you to purchase to take it up to the maximum of 5 years. I'm just going to close that screen here, and I see here that it's got an option with a blue button saying Start Smart Installation. So I'll click that. So now it gives me the option for the firmware version. We can carry on with what we're using now. We can click check for update, which is what I'll do, and it will just check online. So long as your NAS was connected to your main network and there was DHCP or a router on the network that's able to give the NAS an IP address, it's got internet access to be able to check to see if it needs a firmware update on its own. Mine's already on the latest one. If you had a custom firmware or something off our website you wanted to run instead, you can upload that here, browse to that file on your local machine and upload that there as well. So I'm just going to carry on with the current version and click next. So here's where you do the personalization of your NAS. So it wants the NAS name. So in my case, I'm going to be quite boring and just call it the model name, which is the TS-364. Under username, I'll just put Craig. And in password, I'm going to type a password that I want to use. So there we go, got that done. You can no longer use a username of admin or anything obvious as the username. You've got to type something yourself, so it will restrict you from using some different options. So admin cannot be used. So whatever username you create here, it will be a new user given admin privileges. So this is just for security. So I'm going to click next. So now it's asking what time zone I'm in and do I want to synchronize with the time server. I'm going to leave that as default and say, yep, that's all fine. Click next. And do I want to set a static IP address? So here you can go use static IP address and type some information in manually if you wish, or you can just leave it on the obtain. For this one, I'm going to leave it on obtain. If you were going to be running any services on the QNAP that you wanted to be accessible through a router, through your firewall maybe, like the VPN server functions, media server functions. You might want to set a static IP address here, because if you're doing port forwards from your router, that's normally based on an IP address. So you'd want to have the QNAP on an IP address that never changes, so that that rule always stays active even if the QNAP's IP changes because your router told it to. So I'm just going to leave it on obtain for this one, just for the purposes of the demo, but you could set a static one there if you wanted to as well. And you can also set the static IP later. None of the decisions you're making here are there forever. If you want to go in and change them later, you can change all of these settings later on. So I'm just going to click apply. Gives you a little warning that any data on the drives that you've got inserted is going to be destroyed. So do you want to proceed? And it just says initialize. So I'm fine with that. So now it's going to run through the wizard. It's going to show you some interesting things about the OS as it goes through. So just some things for you to read. This will take a couple of minutes, so I'll just go quiet while this is happening. And I'll come back when it's ready for the next step to log into the NAS that's freshly been set up. Okay, so that's the NAS setup done. So now we see an option at the bottom to go to the NAS management, which I'll click. And this is going to bring me to the login page. So this is the page that's going to greet you every time you log into the NAS from now on. So I'm going to log in with the credentials that I typed in the setup wizard, which was Craig and the password that I chose. Just going to click login. I'm not going to save my password. So now I see an option for data and privacy. So here I'm just going to click continue. You've got a notice to read here, and you click continue on that one. And then it's going to go into the operating system, and it's going to highlight a couple of things for you. So you have to click through those, but it's just going to tell you a little bit. So here at the top left is the main menu. This is where all the system settings and applications would be for the NAS itself. If we go and click through, we've got where your control panel is, where your app center is, and up here you've got access account settings for the access account that you're currently logged in on. Then it's going to pop up the storage and snapshots, and there's a small wizard there for you. Now, one of the first things I'm going to do is I'm going to set up the initial setup wizard for doing the storage, get that going straight away. So here I can see I've got 1, 2, 3. So if I click onto, sorry, here's system data collection agreement, you can choose to say yes or no to that one. So I'm going to go to disks and VJ board first of all, and this is going to show me my disks. So they're all purple right now. So I can see in the main drive bays on the front of the NAS, the larger drive bays where I've got the hard drives, I've got some 4 terabyte Western Digital Red Plus drives. So I've got 3 of those inserted inside the NAS. And then down here in the M.2 SSD bays, the NVMe bays, I've got some WD Red SN700s, and they're 500 gig each. So I've got 2 of those in there as well. So if I come down to the storage/snapshot section here, this is where I'm going to set up the volumes and storage pools for the NAS. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a new storage pool. So I generally recommend a storage pool first before the volume, because it brings in features such as snapshots, which can protect your data. So if I click new storage pool, you've got options here to enable Q-tier, so you can do tiering of storage if you've got 2 types of storage, SSDs and hard drives, for example. I'm not going to tick that one for now. I'm going to go next. And now it's asking me which drives do I want to put in my first storage pool. So in this one, I'm just going to put the hard drives. As this is QTS, not QUTS Hero, I'm just going to use hard drives for the main one. So here I go disk 1, disk 2, and disk 3. And you'll notice that when I select from 2 disks to 3 disks, this RAID type that's auto-selected or suggested for you is going to change from RAID 1 to RAID 5. So if I click that, it does change it. You can change it around if you want to, so you can select it to be a different RAID mode if you want. You could do 2 disks and then say, I would like to have a hot spare disk as disk 3, so you could have a 2-disk RAID 1 with a hot spare, so you can set it up that way if you want to as well. For me, I'm going to set it up in a RAID 5 with all 3 disks. So that's auto-suggested there, and I'm going to click next. The M.2 SSDs currently are unticked. I'm not allocating them to anything yet. I will create an SSD cache a bit later on with those. So I'm going to click next. One thing I generally will do here is I will untick the alert threshold. So this is when the NAS is full. Let me know when it's 80%. I personally don't set that on the storage pool because I generally will use thick provision volumes rather than thin provision. If you're going to use thin provision volumes, definitely leave this ticked. But for thick provisions, I'm going to untick this. And by default, the NAS will choose thick provision. So I'm going to untick that option, and I'm fine with the pool guaranteed snapshot space being about 20% of the capacity. Again, you can change this setting later. I'm going to click next, and I'm going to click create. just another confirmation that all data that is on the disk currently will be erased. Do you want to continue? I'll say OK to that one. So this will take a couple of minutes to create. Once that's done, it will give me a pop-up telling me it's now time to create a volume. So we'll just wait for that to appear. Okay, there we go. So now it says storage pool 1, the creation of it is completed. So now it says you should do a new volume. So I'm going to click the button that's there, say new volume. If you did close this, you can always come up the top here and click create volume instead. But I'm just going to click the new volume button here. Now by default, it's auto-selected a thick volume. If you click the change type option, it does give you the option of the different types of things that you can create. So thick is basically pre-allocated space. If you tell it that it's going to be a volume sized at 2 terabytes, it will immediately remove 2 terabytes from the available storage pool. Whereas with a thin volume, if you say it's going to be 2 terabytes, but you haven't got any data in it yet, it essentially doesn't use any space from the storage pool. It would only use the 2 terabytes once you put 2 terabytes of data inside the volume. So it is a bit more flexible, and you can change at any time your volumes from a thick volume to a thin volume and vice versa. But I'm just going to let it go to thick volume here. So I'm going to click OK. Location, storage pool 1. I've only got one pool, so that's the only choice that I've got. So I'm going to click next. And now it's asking how big do I want this volume to be. Now for me personally, in a sort of home environment setup, I often find it much more flexible to just have one large space. So rather than creating lots of different volumes for different things, I would usually just click the set to max button here, and what this is going to do, give you a little warning that there's going to be no free space in the pool to create any other volumes, which I'm fine with. So I'm going to click OK on that one. But you could set this up a little differently. When we get to the SSD cache later, the SSD cache is enabled on volumes specifically. So if you wanted one of your bits of storage to be accelerated by the SSD cache but not another, it might be wise there to create the 2 separate volumes, because you can add one volume to the cache and leave one out of it if you wanted to. I'm fine with all the data on this NAS being accelerated by the SSD cache, so when I go to create that, I'm fine that it will only see one volume. So as we scroll down here, we've got some different options here. Now here's where the alert threshold of 80% is coming in. So rather than having it on the storage pool, I would rather it on the volume where the data actually is. Here is where you can also choose things like encryption, and it's also enabling the snapshot schedule for me. So it's going to retain the snapshots, and it's going to do a snapshot every day at 1 AM. So I've got an immediate restore point. Now this wouldn't be a backup as such, because the snapshot would have to be put somewhere else for it to be an official backup. But it's a great way that if you accidentally delete something or something happens to the NAS, you can always restore the NAS to the state from 1 AM every single day. You've got these restore points built into the NAS with the snapshot capability. Again, you can turn those off if you don't need them, but I would recommend leaving that on. So I'm just going to click next. It's going to give me a summary of everything that we've just set, and I'm just going to click finish. So as part of creating the very first volume, it's going to also create some default folders and some other things that the NAS needs, some other shares and things, but you can also create your own shares there as well. So here it's saying when the volume says ready on it, so that won't take too long. You can start by storing data and doing some other things if you wish. Set up the schedules on the snapshots if you want to do it differently from how we've done it. But that's just going to go off and initialize itself now. Once that's finished initializing and creating all the default shares and folders that it's got to do, I'm going to enable the SSD cache, which is over here on the left hand side. So as soon as this says ready and it's finished doing what it's doing, I'm then going to go and enable the cache acceleration. So I'll come back to you when this bit's done here up to the ready state. Okay, so now we can see that the data volume 1 says ready and the storage pool 1 says ready with synchronizing. And the synchronizing is the RAID being set up, so you're not fully redundant from a drive failure till this is finished. So you can click on synchronizing there, or at the top here there's a handy little number 1 over the running background tasks. If you click that, it gives you a summary of how long that RAID group is going to take to fully be redundant. So in this case it's probably just under 9 hours and it's going to be ready. You can speed that up. It's on the default speed setting right now. You can put that up to high priority and it will go faster, but the NAS performance during that will be less. So default is a good middle ground. It still gets the job done pretty quick, but you can still use the NAS quite effectively as well. So now I'm going to click onto the cache acceleration menu on the left hand side, because I've still got those 2 SSDs in here that I haven't allocated to anything. So if I was to go to the disks VJ board, we can see that disks 1, 2 and 3 have changed to a blue icon now, letting me know that they're used for data, but the 2 SSDs are still purple. They're still free for use for any other task. So I could create another volume on them directly, or I can create a cache. So that's what I'm going to do here. So I'm going to click the big blue plus symbol. It's going to tell you a little bit about what the SSD cache can do. I'm just going to click next. I'm going to select the 2 SSDs that are in the NAS. Now by default it's chosen a cache type of read-only in a RAID type of RAID 0. So I'm going to change the cache from read-only to a read-write because I want it to be optimized for data both being written to the NAS and read from the NAS. So I want the benefit in both directions. So I'm going to choose read-write, and by default it's going to choose a redundant RAID mode. So it's chosen RAID 1. You can override this and use RAID 0, but there's a lot of warnings there about not doing that because the data won't be protected. If the data's in the SSD cache and one of them was to fail, you would lose the data. So I would recommend using 2 SSDs and using RAID 1 if you want to use a read-write cache on this particular NAS. So I'm going to say next to that one. This is SSD over provisioning, so this is an option with SSDs. So some SSDs, especially say lower cost ones, their performance can drop the fuller they get. So if they were at say 50% capacity, they work a lot faster than if they're at 90% capacity. In our App Center, we do have an SSD profiling tool that you can run, and it basically runs the SSDs at different varying levels in 10% increments, and it tells you how fast they are at different levels of being full, and then you can choose the benefit of which speed vs capacity condition that you want to choose. I'm just going to leave it on the default of 10%. I've got some pretty nice SSDs here with these WD Red SN700s that I'm using for this one. Now at the bottom you've got the question for do you want to accelerate random I/O, and we give you an example of what that would be, or all I/O. And in a lot of home applications that be used for say file serving, media streaming, I'm going to choose the all I/O option here. So absolutely every bit of data coming in and out of the NAS is going to be accelerated by the SSDs. So I'm going to say next to that one. It's now asking which volumes you want to accelerate. So on my personal NAS, I use it for recording CCTV cameras, IP cameras. So on that one, I actually created a separate volume for my QVR Pro software that's doing that, where the cameras have been recorded. Because I did not want the SSD cache that I'm running to be optimizing the camera storage. They're reading and writing all the time, well, especially writing all the time, 24/7 from lots of different cameras. My SSD cache would be totally consumed by that task. So for me, I created a separate volume dedicated with about 1 terabyte of capacity just for camera recording, and I did not add that to the SSD cache on my personal NAS, but you can choose to do that any way you like. So here I'm going to choose Data Vol 1. That's the only one I've got. I'm going to click Next, and I'm going to click Create. Just a little warning that if there is any data already on the SSDs, this will erase them by doing this. And also, if you want to remove the SSDs from the NAS, you've got to disable and remove the cache function first. The data will be flushed off them, so it's not instant. It does have to copy the data off to the hard drives, but you can do it if you want to. So I'm going to take I understand and click OK. So this will take a couple of minutes, so it might look like it's doing nothing at the moment. It just says loading data. After a minute or two, this off option is going to change to on, and you're going to start seeing the information down here for Data Vol 1 with the cache being active on it. Okay, there we go. So now what we can see is we can see that the SSD cache has been created. So we can see RAID group 2, because the first RAID group was the hard drives that we created. So RAID group 2, there's the capacity and the type of RAID that the cache is using, and down below is what is being cached. So this would be data vol 1. If I make this bigger, it should be easier to read. So the data vol 1 is what's being accelerated. I've got it for read write, and all I/O is there. And the option to turn this on and off is up there. And at the top right, we've got the manage option. So you can change the amount of over provisioning. You can remove the cache. You can make the cache bigger if you've added more SSDs, and different settings for within the cache. But that's the SSD cache now enabled, and it's accelerating the main volume. If I go back to storage and snapshots, we've got the main view here. We can see that we've now got a lightning bolt symbol next to data vol 1, which is telling me that this volume is now being accelerated by the SSDs. If you had a second volume that you weren't accelerating, it just wouldn't have a lightning bolt symbol next to it. So that's really everything we need to do for an initial setup anyway within the storage and snapshots application. So we can close out of that and do some other tasks within the NAS. So over here there's a get started guide. So if you pop out the notice board, which is this I letter up here with the 10+ symbol next to it, and it's going to show up all the notices, and we've got a sort of 3-stage step that you can do to get your NAS ready. So we've done step 1, which is creating the storage space. Step 2 is create or sign into a QNAP ID. So this is if you wanted to register the device, enable remote access, things like that. Before I do that step, I like to set the security policy. So this is installing the security counselor from the App Center. So we'll do that next. Now the first time you open up many of the apps on the QNAP, you will get a bit of a setup wizard. You'll see that here on the App Center. So it's saying welcome to the App Center, and it'll show you through, so you can click through the guide and it'll show you a few different options, or you can simply close it. You can have it display each time you open up the App Center, or you can say not display. It looks like I do have an app update available as well, so I'm just going to click update all the apps at the top right and click OK. The NAS will go to the internet itself, check for updates, and download them if you tell them to. License centers are pretty small ones, so it's usually done very quick. So that's just updating that, and we can see we've got a base set of apps that are installed. Things for managing the network, the malware remover downloads automatically when you create your first volume and runs on a schedule. And some other options that we can do here is add security counselor, which is what it said in the notice board setting on the side. So for security counselor, the easiest way to find it is go to QTS Essentials on the left hand side. And if you scroll right the way to the bottom here, we should see that you've got Security Counselor. So there it is as an option, and it's just a single click install. So if you just click install, it will go off and download that app and install it. Again, it's not a huge app. The whole point with Security Counselor is to check your NAS, see what's enabled or disabled on it, and does anything need changing for a given security policy that you've got set. So one of the first steps within Security Counselor, now that's installed, I'm going to click open. Just incidentally, it's also going to be on your desktop as well. So if I just show you that, it's also added the icon to it on your desktop, so you can go back to it anytime, and it's also in the left-hand menu down here as well. So it always adds the program in a few different places so you can find it. Now it's asking to choose your security policy. So for now, I'll just set it on the basic security policy, and I'll say scan now. So it's going to scan based off the parameters of the basic security policy to see, have I got any things that can be approved on from the default settings that we've set the NAS up on. So here it's saying I'm at medium risk. There's one thing that needs checking, so I'm going to click View Reports. And I can see here that it says QTS is allowing the installation of applications without a valid digital signature. So that's done for ease of use. If somebody does want to install a third-party application, you can without difficulty. But if you wanted to disable that option, you can just click it. It's in blue here. You can click that, and it will take you exactly to the setting where you can change that. So I'm going to untick the allowing of any applications to be installed without a valid signature, and I'm just going to apply that setting. So once I've applied that setting, I'm going to go back to the Security Counselor, and I'm going to scan again just to see, have I got rid of that one error that was there? Is it going to be much happier now? So if I go back to the overview, click on scan, hopefully this time it's going to show that there is no risks based off that security policy, the basic one that I've got. We can see here that I've got no risk detected now. Brilliant. So that solved that. Everything is good. Here with the antivirus, it's currently disabled. I'm going to leave that disabled just for now, because when I go to change the security policy, you can update them from a lot of different options to whatever customization you want. But I'm going to change it to the next one up, which is intermediate security policy. I'm going to apply that, click OK. And it's going to prompt me, do I want to scan again because I've changed the policy? So I'm going to say yes. So this time it's going to say there's a lot more things that need looking at, simply because I've now increased the level of security. So a lot more things will need some settings change to comply with that policy. So here it says I've got a few different things. So the first one is it wants the NAS to force account passwords to change every 180 days. So I can click that. And you've got options here to require users to change passwords periodically. So you can say I want them to change it instead of every 90, let's say 100 days. So you can click apply on that one. There you go. So it's telling you when the first reminder is going to be for somebody to do it. So we can come out of that. I can see the NAS hasn't run an antivirus scan for more than 30 days, and it does not use the latest virus definitions. So in that case, I would have to go back and enable one of the antivirus options. There's two on the QNAP. You can enable basically the free one, which is from a company called QNAP. It's an open source one. So we can change different things and look around at different settings and do that. Within that, it's got virus definition updates, and we've also got one in the App Center from McAfee. McAfee does require you to pay a subscription to McAfee to get the latest virus definitions. But there we go. So we don't have the error anymore that said anything about passwords not being changed. That one's gone away. So we've sorted one out. But you can go through each different one and sort the problem out. Each time the scan runs, it's going to give you a little error up here if you are at medium risk or not. So it's going to keep reminding you daily that there's something that you need to look at to bring it more in line with what you're doing. So up here with the notice board, we've got some other things. So you can clear any of these out. So you can click, are you sure you want to close, get started? OK. And it's going to just give you a summary of some other things that happened during the initial setup. So you can close through these if you want to. So just click the little X, then click OK, and they'll all go away. Once it's completely empty, the number at the top will disappear so that you can start afresh there. So there we go. Some other things to look at for some settings that I guess might be a little bit hidden from some users. If you don't like the color of the wallpaper here, if you click the name of your login at the top, you can go to options. And in here, there's a suite of different functions and features that you can do. So here, one of them is wallpaper. Perhaps you want a different wallpaper. You can apply that one. To change, that's what the colors of wallpapers will be. It will change at 6 AM and 6 PM to a slightly darker one to be easier on your eyes. You can also enable two-step verification here if you want to enable a bit more security. So this uses a mobile app so that you can authenticate using the Authenticator app each time you log in. So even if you've got the username and password to your NAS, without the Authenticator app, you still can't gain access. You can change your password here as well. And if you scroll along a bit further, you can set up things like email accounts, logging out. So if I was to close the web browser window here, it's going to warn me, are you sure you want to leave? If you don't want it to do that, you can untick the warn when leaving QTS, for example, if you don't like that feature. If you don't want it to log you out automatically after a period, you can enable that as well. So that's really covered off most features. If you want to know about the health of the NAS at any point, at the very top right, we've got a dashboard that pops out. This is going to show you all the important things about the NAS. So really, who's currently online on the NAS. If you've got multiple areas of storage, you can check them all out here with a little pie chart of how much it's used. Temperatures, how fast the fan's spinning, current state of the CPU and RAM, your network interfaces. Some people like to have this information all the time. So you can click Resource Monitor and it will pull out the large resource monitor where you can really dive deep into a lot of different settings. If you just want the summary on screen at all times, you can just grab a hold of this where it says resource monitor and drag it out. So that's going to stay down. So even though the dashboard's gone away, the resource monitor's down there. So if you were to open up another window like the control panel, you can always see this information down here if you want to as well. So it's a very useful feature if you do want to keep an eye on how the NAS is running. So you can have those pop out to be always accessible as well. Okay, so that was a quick run through of the TS-364. Again, this one was configured with three 4TB WD Red Plus drives, and it also had two WD Red SN700 NVMe SSDs inserted. So while we call it a 3-bay NAS, it does have 2 SSD bays on top of that, so you've got 5 drives total in this particular unit. If I was to go have a look at the network and virtual switch as well, the other feature is that it does also have a 2.5 gig LAN port. So here we go, we can see adapter 1 is connected at 2.5 gigabits a second, so you can get some very nice transfers in and out. I think on the main product page there it does show you the speed throughputs you can get, so you can get in excess of 250 megabytes a second. So there we go, on the upload into the NAS, 251 megabytes per second, and reading from the NAS up to 271 megabytes a second. So really nice and fast, and even with encryption enabled, the performance is still very high, even if you do have the encryption turned on for security. So again, this is the TS-364. It's got a quad-core Celeron. It's a 3-bay unit, so you need 3 bays at least to do RAID 5. It's the minimum number of drives to do RAID 5, the most popular RAID mode, and it will protect you from up to a single drive failure. So if a drive fails, carry on working, everything's fine. Replace the drive as soon as you can. Okay, so just to give you a quick final look at it, that's the unit. Nice white chassis. It's also very quiet. It's sat on the desk right next to me here, but it's really quiet. The fan on the back is rather large, which means we can spin it very slowly, so it's got a very low noise footprint on there as well. So if anybody has any questions on this unit, please do leave them in the comment section down below. We'll get back to you as soon as possible. Thanks a lot for watching, and if anybody has any tips for any other videos, please do let us know. Thanks a lot. Bye.